Yes, I'm privileged to have with me today Mrs. Sumadhi Perera from National Peace Council and Rohana Hettiarachchi, who is the Executive Director of PAFRL. And today what we want to discuss about, what we want to kind of explore is this whole aspect of the official languages policy. I believe Sumadhi has been doing a lot of work during this last 1 year, I guess, or more than that, on the national languages policy. So can you explain the work that you all are involved in, and also tell us what are the key issues that people are facing, that is with respect to official languages policy?
Okay, thank you, Amma, for the question. So in terms of the official language policy, I think it has many aspects to it. I mean, one part is how the state communicates with the citizen. The notion that the state communicates with the citizen in a language the citizen understands, be it Sinhala, Tamil, either language. The second aspect is also that it is the dignity that is accorded to that particular ethnicity or the speaker of that particular language. Because language also has aspects of identity that comes into play. The third element is, of course, the practical element. When people need to get about their day-to-day business, which necessarily entails involvement or engagement with the state, one has to be able to communicate and be communicated to in a language one understands. So there are these three aspects, I think. And from a fourth point of view, even from the point of view of reconciliation, understanding is important.
Correct.
And if understanding is important, communication is important. And language essentially is a vehicle of that communication process. So language is very important from the lens of reconciliation too. And I believe that it is for that reason that we teach a third language in school, or the other language, Sinhala or Tamil, depending on whichever ethnicity you belong to. But there's the issue of functionality, whether it is a functional language you learn. So that's from the lens of reconciliation. Then from the perspective of people engaging with the government and the language in which the government deals with them or communicates with them, sad to say, even many years after the adoption of the national language policy, there are gaps in implementation. Fundamental gaps, like the non-availability of necessary forms or relevant instructions in the language that the particular member of the public understands. That is one aspect. Then the second aspect is the inability of some state service delivery officials to communicate with the members of the public in terms of the service that they deliver in the language that they understand. So these in a way also impact on how the state delivers service to the people and how it kind of deals with the population, looks after the well-being of the population. So language is at the core of many different things.
I'm going to come back to you with another question. Actually, it's about the COVID situation and how things were communicated and whether it was communicated in all official languages. But I want to ask Rohana this question. See, the official language policy has been there for 3 decades, over 3 decades, we say. But still, as Sumadhi says, there are gaps. It's not being implemented properly. I mean, from your perspective, you have, as a person who's involved in promoting democracy, monitoring elections, from a political standpoint, what can you say about the political will? Is there something lacking in that? And as civil society, what can we do to kind of motivate or to push the state to implement the official languages right to the very limit?
I wish to ask the same question from you, Amma, whether we do have the real policy, the language policy in this country.
We do have.
The policy need to be felt by the public. So if you take an example, if someone from Jaffna who is not having any other language other than the Tamil come to Colombo and wanted to go somewhere from Peta, whether he or she can manage whether the government policy practically implemented in that level. So that is the question. If someone coming from Jaffna or Trinco or Ampara who doesn't know about either Sinhala or English, whether they can manage their work in Colombo office. If someone going from here to Jaffna or northern part of the country, whether they can manage without Tamil language. So that is the practical angle of it. Because we know in generally, yes, policy is there, not only the language policy, most of other policies also. Per se, yes, it's there. But the practical angle of it, very correctly mentioned, Sumadhi also, whether it is practiced in the ground. So the political will we can see only during the election period. So they will come out various proposals how to implement those policies, because they wanted to get, for example, mainly during the presidential elections, they try to attract all the citizens across the country. So they may have a different proposals, but end of the day, whether they are serious about it, when they come up with their national budget, whether they have allocated some amount for that. So the practical point of view, I'm not saying that there is the government doesn't care about the policies. Yes, some individual cases, some department, for example, now the election commissions. So always they are trying to implement the language policy, because otherwise it is violating the people's voting rights. So anyway they have to do it. So there are certain departments based on the head of the institute, they may practice it. But in generally, in overall picture, I'm not sure whether we are having such a policy in place.
My question is now, these are very fundamental big languages Sumadhi also spoke about. I'm wondering why even minority politicians, forget about general minority politicians, even they are not, I get the sense that they are not really kind of pushing that or advocating for it. I may be wrong, but I'd like to get your opinion because you're working closely with a lot of politicians. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, if you look at in plantation sector, how many families, how many individuals are there without having address? So this is the situation in the country. I don't know whether it has corrected now, but I know in even very recent past that some of the civil society colleagues, they have done a project and they push to the government authorities. You can't send a letter. There's no permanent address in the plantation community. So we are talking about the language policy. So this is the situation some part of the country. So there is no political will because if there is a lot of issues, lot of problems with the community, so the politicians will get more opportunities during election period. So they can address in publicly and they can get the vote also. So they don't want to resolve all these problems. They may talk about the policy level, but in practical situation it's completely different. So even the plantation community, plantation level politicians, and they also not serious about
resolving issues.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I'm not saying again that the entire politics. I know some individual politicians, they are very serious about their community. They wanted to make this change. But in general view, how many politicians in this country? So we have roughly about 10,000 politicians, local government nearly 9,000, provincial 455, and we have 225 parliamentarians. So roughly about every 2,500 people, we do have one politician. So how country we are now after 19 years franchise now. We got it in this is actually the last year. We completed the 90 years, not 19, sorry, 90 years. But if you look back the last 9 decades, whether politicians make such a difference. So this is, unfortunately, this is not only the language policy. This is the entire country, the politicians, how they take us from independence up to now.
So, Rohana, my question to you is about from a political viewpoint. How do you see this? Because we have been having this language policy for 3 decades. But of course, as Sumadhi was speaking a little while ago, there are gaps, there's issues about implementation. So I want to ask you, how do you see the political, how do you see from a standpoint of a person who's involved with politicians, because you're monitoring elections, you are involved in promoting democracy, all that, and you're working very closely with politicians with different levels, national, local. So, what is your experience from that perspective about looking at the way politicians either support or not support the official languages policy?
Yes, Amma. Even if we are criticizing the government policy, I mean, if we look at ourselves as a civil society, how far we are serious about the language policy. For example, if I don't know, I mean, how it's practiced by NPC, but including PAPL, most of the organizations. But for example, if we circulate some press release or whatever, the first will come either English or either Sinhala. We very rarely we are trying to issue the statement with 3 languages, at least Sinhala and Tamil. So the priority is not there. The attitude of the people. I think if we wanted to change this culture, we have to change the attitude of the public. Even the government official, maybe the civil society, media, we are not serious enough from a Sinhalese point of view. I think the Tamil point of view also may be the same. In the northern part of the country, eastern part of the country, when they do something, whether they are serious about the Sinhala language, whether we are serious about the Tamil language in practical, the way we work in the ground level. So we need to change the attitude of the people. So this is we don't have that, we don't build that culture. We just serious about the policy, but we are not serious about practicing.
And actually, as you said, it has to start with us.
Exactly. I mean, we have to start from ourselves, from the civil society point of view. So, if we can cross the country with all the civil society, follow the same principle or a policy, then the rest of the people automatically will follow that.
So, my last question, or maybe I hope I'll be able to kind of wind this up. You see, sometimes we come across these 2 kind of schools of thought. One is, why can't the minorities learn the majority language? That's the majoritarian kind of mindset. And it comes from even intellectuals, the urban people. The other is slightly different. Why can't we have English as the lead language? If you learn English, the world is all open, whatever. But my view is people fail to realize that they're missing something. Each language has its cultural kind of heritage, and the richness comes from each language. Whether it's Sinhala or Tamil, there is vast amount of history behind it, rich cultural heritage. So that's what we want to promote. But how do you deal with these 2 thoughts, ideas? Why can't the minority learn the majority language? Or why can't people learn English when they will, communicate this? Both seem logical, but I think as peace builders, we have a problem with it. Your response, please.
Okay, so I think that what we're dealing with here is the aspect of inclusion. And the reason why Sri Lanka had a long war, a long civil war, is because we had failed in just that. We had
Exactly.
we had failed to kind of evolve a mindset that is inclusive. And I think Rohana raised a good point. It is a mindset that is inclusive that will ensure that wherever you are, you have your publications, your communiques in all languages. Civil society is a part of that process, but the state is a very important actor. Because like I said before, what is most important to the citizen is how the state treats the citizen. So therefore, the state is bound to treat its citizen with dignity. And communicating in the language or in that citizen's language is an aspect of that dignity. So I think when we say that why can't the minorities learn Sinhala, or let's just move on and let's all learn English, we are losing sight of two things. We are losing sight of the dignity of those minorities, the minorities who speak the language. And also I think we are also losing sight of the fact that in this country, functional language learning is also very limited. There's a practical element there.
Yeah.
Because we know we are taught language in schools, but there again, the question of whether it's a functional language that these students learn.
It's to pass an exam probably, and that's it.
Yeah. So two aspects. So functionality is one, and dignity of the other.
Amma, just to make one comment on that. If you look at the language as a communications tool, yes, then that is fine whether Tamil, English, or Sinhalese. But in this country, the language is, as she mentions, is a dignity. It's a beyond communications in the country.
It's your heritage. It's
exactly,
your identity.
It's my identity. So if we wanted to change that, we wanted to change that culture. We wanted to, let's say for example now, look at in India. If someone asks their city, they say, I'm Indian, but in our context. So I'm Sinhalese, I'm Buddhist, I'm Tamil, I'm Catholic. So the way they answer, if you ask the same question from 10 people, you can get at least 8 answers. I'm Sinhalese, or I'm Buddhist, or I'm Tamil, or Muslim, or whatever. So very rarely you can see it's a different view. So this is their dignity, and this is beyond the communications.
I tend to have a different kind of view about it because I call it the inside the veil identity. Now, if you are asked in Sri Lanka by somebody the question, right, you will say you're a Sinhalese or whatever. You might. But supposing you go outside this country and somebody asks, who are you? You're not going to say you're a Sinhalese, you're going to say you're Sri Lanka. So it is, I think, I wouldn't fault people for identifying themselves as a Sinhala or Sinhalese person or Buddhist or Tamil or whatever, because it's the context, and because the question that other person asks is also a question that demands your final identity. You know that when you ask a question, are you, who are you or whatever, you say I'm from some place and I'm Sinhalese. And that has a history because you want to identify yourself with whatever. So it's a long road. I think if you want to take people from there and to be able to get them to say I'm a Sri Lankan, it's a kind of a long road. Because there's a history attached to it, a history of identity, crisis attached to it. That's the way I see it.
It is true, Amma. If we go out of the country, if someone meet, if they are Sri Lankan, yes, there is some attach, and they are happy to meet Sri Lankan, whether it's Sinhalese or a Muslim or Tamil or whatever. But let's say in the same group, there is a Tamil team and the Sinhalese team. With team you are going to attach, and how you deal with them. So that is the difference. I have been travel across maybe 20 to 25 countries, I have seen this in my experience.
Yeah.
How people
Segregate,
exactly, yeah, within the community.
Mm.
If there is no Sinhalese, I'm happy to attach with any Muslim or any Sri Lankan Tamil or whatever. But if there is a, so that is the culture we build over the years, especially by the politicians. If you look at the political campaign during elections period, how they touch upon the language, the ethnicity, the religious. So they try to take the advantage. So I think now the citizens of these countries realize this situation, but it's still, even the last presidential election or a parliamentary elections, how they try to use the language ethnicity for their political campaign. So we need to change that from top to the bottom, and actually bottom to up, both way. Otherwise, the policy will never implement if we can't change that attitude, if we can't build that culture. So that is my thinking on that.
So that brings us to the end of our discussion. I must thank you, Sumadhi, for joining us, and also Rohana. Thank you so much for all the insights you brought, the suggestions, spoke about how we should start from ourselves, and observations about the culture. I'm sure that those who listen to this discussion have many things to take. And thank you so much, and I wish you all the best. And so let's start with ourselves. We'll work together, and we'll see that national languages policy is working in this country. So let me relate a story, and I like to ask a question at the end of the story. Okay? So let's assume there was a country, maybe like Sri Lanka, and there were just only 10 people living in that country. And out of the 10, 7 really loved to eat kiribat. They also eat keong once a year. And there were 2 others who loved to eat wadi, and 1 person liked to eat patla. So they were living in this country, and then one day God comes down and calls all the 10 people together and gives them a mango seed and say, okay, I'm going to give you a mango seed, plant this, and you will get mangoes, you will share the mangoes, look after the mango tree, and get benefit out of it. So all 10 of them worked among themselves peacefully. They watered the plant together, they brought fertilizer and kind of nourished the plant, and very soon from the seed came a sapling, like then a plant, then it became a huge tree with mangoes. So it's time for the harvest. So one day under the mango tree, 2 people came. One person who loved to eat keong and kiribat, and another person who loved to eat wadi. So now they are picking up, plucking mangoes. And while they are plucking the mangoes, the one who loves to eat kiribat says, you know what? There are 7 of us. Therefore, we are entitled. I am entitled to have more mangoes than you. Then the person who ate wadi or liked to eat wadi said, come on. How can that be? All of us looked after this mango tree equally. All of us have an equal share. Okay? So they started fighting. Right? This fighting became intensified, and soon there were 7 people against 2 people, 1 person joining another party, and this whole mango tree became neglected. Okay. My question to you is, who is right here? Do you think the person who said, I have a bigger share, irrespective of, let's not talk about whether he ate kiribat or whatever. The person who said, just because I am in the majority, I have a greater share, is he right? What do you think? I think the answer to this question and the way we live in this country will determine our future. Thank you.